symptomatic. We don't know for sure how many people have it, so we don't exactly know its reproduction number and its mortality rate. There's no vaccine, and there's no cure. In another article published in the Wall Street Journal on March the 8th, I wrote, if the US turns out to have proportionately as many cases as South Korea, it will soon have some 46,000 cases and more than 300 deaths, or 1,200 deaths if the US mortality rate is as high as Italy's. At that point, total confirmed cases in the United States stood at just 541, deaths at 22. We passed 46,000 cases on March the 24th and 1,200 deaths on March the 25th, just over 2 weeks later. On March the 15th, I noted, John F. Kennedy Airport was thronged yesterday with people doing what, since time immemorial, they've done in times of plague, fleeing the big city and spreading the virus. We're entering the panic phase of the pandemic. That was the same day I myself flew with my wife and my 2 youngest children from California to Montana. I've been here ever since. I wrote and thought about little else in the first half of 2020. Why this intense preoccupation? The answer is that although my core competency is financial history, I've been keenly interested in the role of disease in history ever since studying the Hamburg cholera epidemic of 1892 as a graduate student more than 30 years ago. Richard Evans's meticulously detailed study of that episode introduced me to the idea that the mortality caused by a deadly pathogen is partly a reflection of the social and political order it attacks. It was the class structure, as much as the bacterium Vibrio cholerae, that killed people in Hamburg, Evans argued, because the entrenched power of the city's property owners had been an insuperable obstacle to improving the city's antiquated water and sewage systems. The mortality rate for the poor was 13 times higher than for the rich. Researching the pity of war a few years later, I was struck by statistics that suggested the German army had collapsed in 1918 partly because of a surge of illness, possibly resulting from the Spanish influenza pandemic. The War of the World delved more deeply into the history of the 1918-19 pandemic, showing how the First World War ended with twin pandemics, not only influenza, but also the ideological contagion of Bolshevism. The work I did on empires in the 2000s also involved excursions into the history of contagious disease. No account of European settlement in the New World could have omitted the role that disease played in thinning the Indians to make room for the English, as John Archdale, the governor of Carolina in the 1690s, callously remarked. The title of the second chapter of my book Empire was White Plague. I was also very struck by the terrible toll of tropical disease on British soldiers stationed far from home. A man's chances of surviving a tour of duty in Sierra Leone were pitifully low, 1 in 2. Civilization devoted an entire chapter to the role of modern medicine in the expansion of Western settlement and rule, showing how colonial regimes meaningfully improved our knowledge of and ability to control contagious diseases, without glossing over the brutal methods often employed. The Great Degeneration explicitly warned of our growing vulnerability to the random mutation of viruses like influenza, while The Square in the Tower was essentially a history of the world based on the insight that network structures are as important as viruses in determining the speed and extent of a contagion. As I write, in late October 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic is far from over. There have been nearly 26 million confirmed cases, a fraction of the total number infected with the SARS-CoV-2 virus, to judge by seroprevalence figures from around the world. The death toll approaches 1.2 million, which is certainly an underestimate, as the statistics from a large number of countries, notably Iran and Russia, can't be trusted. And the cumulative body count continues to rise globally at a rate of more than 3.5% a week, to say nothing of the number of people whose health has been permanently damaged, which no one has yet estimated. It seems increasingly likely that Lord Rees, Britain's Astronomer Royal, has won his bet with the Harvard psychologist Steven Pinker that bioterror or bioerror will lead